Hey everybody, Taffy here. So I've been playing Phoenix since beta at an immortal level, but I've played a little bit at all of the ranks, and I oftentimes see Phoenix players throw Curveball suboptimally. So I wanted to do a little bit of a study on the ability and ways we can maximize its value to help you become a better Phoenix player and a better gamer. But before we jump into these techniques, I want to give two general Curveball tips. So the first is to pre-aim immediately as soon as you throw the Flashbang. Oftentimes I see Phoenix players throw flashes and then follow it out with their crosshair to aim at their first target. The problem is that by the time your crosshair gets to the enemy, your mouse isn't centered on the mouse pad anymore, so any additional adjustments are awkward. But if you pre-aim immediately, you're able to recenter your mouse on your mouse pad before you peek the corner. And once you see the target, your adjustments can be made from a more natural mouse position. The second Curveball tip I can give is to really focus on stopping before shooting. Now this is super important in all of Valorant, but I feel like it's extra important on Phoenix because people will often throw flashbangs, they'll peek, see that their target is flashed, get overly excited, and start shooting before they stop moving. And if you're using the Phantom, it can be really hard to rain the spray in. You might have to reset, and at that point, the enemy likely won't be flashed anymore, and your advantage will be gone. So it's really important that you stop and then shoot. Cool, so now that we have those tips out of the way, let's move on to general Curveball techniques. So the first technique is the normal flashbang. What does that look like? Well, we're standing next to a corner and we simply lob it around the corner. Now, this has two main weaknesses. The first is that it's actually thrown at about head level. So if somebody's holding this angle, all they have to do is kind of aim roughly where the flashbang gets thrown, and when they're blind, they can just shoot as they fall away, and there's a decent chance that they'll catch you. The second issue with it is it's actually highly visible for a long time before it explodes. So in our future techniques, we really want to minimize the amount of time they can see the flashbang before it explodes. Basically, make it the best pop flash possible. Now, the normal flashbang does have one really good use that the other techniques don't, and that is it's good for getting operas off of pixel holds and hitting off angles. So if I throw a flashbang that hits too far from the wall, or if they're holding an off angle farther back, they won't get flashed. But if I throw a deep flashbang, it will hit these awkward angles that a normal flash wouldn't. So let's take a look at what that looks like. So if I'm here and I'm just aiming at this sliver of space with an op, the flashbang will hit here, pop, and since they have an op, they don't really have time to look away and come back and regain the angle before you can peek. Cool, so with normal flashbangs out of the way, let's talk about the reverse flashbang. So when do you want to use the reverse flashbang? Well, if I'm coming up A short, I will often throw the normal flashbang since it hits all 7 of these locations, which are the normal A positions that people will hold from. But what if they're in an awkward location? What if they're holding outside of bathrooms? Well, if I throw a normal flashbang, you'll see that it's actually popping about here. So if I'm holding an off angle, or just like a little bit away from it, there's no way to flash them with a normal flashbang. So this is a situation where you would want to use a reverse flashbang. Obviously, I don't recommend doing this blind all of the time, but if you have like information that an opponent likes to hold there, or like a Sova dart or a Sova arrow tells you that they're holding there, this reverse technique can be really helpful. The other time you'll really want to use a reverse technique is when you can't get to the corner to throw a normal flashbang around it. So I think B-Long is a good example of this. If I want to push into Fountain, there are 3 locations the opponent can be in, right? It's like this hallway, behind the fountain, or over here. This one's less applicable for this situation actually. But it'll take me a long time to push all the way down B-Long so I can get my flashbang around the corner. So this is a situation where the reverse flashbang is good, where I think my opponent will peek me before I can get to the corner. So from their perspective, as they swing, they'll get flashed and you'll have a huge advantage because they'll have to stop moving and they're blind. Cool, so that's most of the uses of the reverse flashbang in my opinion, so now let's move on to the down flashbang. Now this is a flashbang that I don't particularly like, but I've seen a lot of other videos talk about it, so I wanted to include it and talk about why I don't like it. So the down flashbang looks something like this. You bounce it off the ground and try to get a nice pop flash going. So I don't like it for a couple of reasons. First is that the Looking down requires you to look up before you peek. It's a little bit of extra mouse movement, so if we can reduce that, that would be awesome. The second problem is if I just throw it at the ground out here, it's actually visible for about the same amount of time as a normal flashbang, maybe a little bit less, but we really want to look for that perfect pop flash. So in summary, the second issue is that it's difficult to hit consistently. So the third issue is that, once again, if people are holding pixel angles, the down flash actually sends the flashbang pretty far away from the wall. So if they're holding a pixel angle, there's a decent chance that they don't get flashed. So that's where the up flashbang comes in. The up flashbang has all of the strengths of the down flashbang, but it also gets you a little bit of depth and it'll flash more people. With the added benefit of it being a little bit more consistent. There aren't a whole lot of roofs in Valorant, so in most situations you just have to look up like 80 degrees and you can get a really nice pop flash that has that added depth. Cool, so that is the down and the up flashbang technique. Let's talk about the backwards technique really quickly. The backwards technique is pretty straightforward. I'm just going to look behind me and throw the flashbang. Now you'll see that this is actually pretty ideal for pop flashing. It's right here past the threshold, which means your opponent's B-long won't have a lot of time to react, but it has a couple problems in itself. One is that when I throw the flashbang, I'm pretty far away from where I want to peek from, so it requires a lot of movement. Second, it's a lot of mouse movement. I'm doing a 180 before I peek, so you have to be really confident in your quick 180s. So with this in mind, I only really recommend using this technique when you're flashing for a buddy. So if somebody's like holding octagon with me, I can actually flash behind them and they can swing out with a perfect pop flash, and I can actually follow it up by swinging after them to take the 2v1. Cool, so that's the backwards flash technique. Oh, one more small problem is this technique actually requires a lot of space. So say I'm in like a tighter situation, right? There's no way I'm going to be like using this in this tube. It's a good way to flash yourself. Cool, so now time to talk about the close to the wall technique. And honestly, this is probably the one that I would recommend doing in most situations that you can afford. So normally I would throw a flashbang to the right. I'm going to continue throwing it to the right, but I'm going to look at the wall. So when I throw the flashbang to the right, it'll actually hit the wall and the momentum will carry it left, to the opposite of the direction that I'm throwing it. And you can see that gives us a really nice pop flash. But the other benefit that makes this so powerful is it allows me to pre-aim the location that I expect the enemy to be at while throwing a pop flash. So when I peek, my crosshair is effortlessly aiming at head level, and any additional adjustments are super easy to make. I basically just have to stop moving and click for a free kill. Cool. Oh, and I really want to give a shout out to XDR. I know he's been talking about this off the wall technique a lot in his more recent videos, and he's an awesome creator, so go check that guy out. His YouTube is simply XTR, and I will throw a link in the description. He is a great resource, so I highly recommend you check him out. Cool, so that's all the techniques that I have for today. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to put them in the box below, and I will try to get back to you. Thanks so much for watching, and have a good one.